ready to explore something really cool.
Mm.
Aquaponic cannabis cultivation.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating way to grow. It really taps into this whole natural ecosystem thing.
I know, right? Like it's more than just, oh, I have a fish tank and some plants. It's this whole closed loop, right? Like fish waste turns into plant food.
Exactly. And then the plants clean the water for the fish.
Yeah.
It's pretty brilliant when you think about it.
I know. So for our listeners who maybe haven't heard about this before, how would you explain how aquaponics actually works, like in a practical sense?
Okay, so picture this. You've got your fish tank, right? Full of fish doing their fishy thing. And above the tank, you have this grow bed, kind of like a platform.
Oh, okay, I'm seeing it.
Yeah, and in this grow bed, instead of soil, you've got a growing medium, like clay pellets are popular.
So the plants are basically like sitting on top of the fish tank.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the water from the fish tank gets pumped up to the grow bed, so the plant roots are bathed in this, like, nutrient-rich water.
Ah, that's how they get their food. But then
Yeah.
what?
Well, the water then drains back down to the fish tank, so it's a continuous cycle.
Yo, wow, it's like this like self-sustaining ecosystem. But I was reading about tilapia being like the perfect fish for this. Something about their waste.
Oh, yeah, you're thinking of that study, right? The one from the University of Wageningen.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, they found that tilapia waste has, like, the perfect ratio of phosphorus and potassium,
Which cannabis plants need, right?
especially during flowering. Like, it's crazy how it lines up perfectly.
That is so cool. Okay, so we know how it works, but what are some of the like the big benefits? Our source mentioned faster growth rates and bigger yields. That's going to be a huge draw, right?
For sure. Think of it like this. The fish waste is basically like constant organic fertilizer,
Oh, okay, so it's like they're getting fed 24/7.
pretty much. And because it's natural, you're not dealing with those, like, harsh chemicals and stuff.
It's better for the plant, better for the consumer, ultimately.
Exactly. Plus, think about how much water you save. Traditional growing uses a ton of water.
Right, because you have to keep watering the soil and all that.
Yeah, but with aquaponics, the water is just constantly being, like, recirculated and filtered by the plants.
So it's like eco-friendly on multiple levels, less water waste, no harsh chemicals.
And because it's a closed system, you're way less likely to get pests and diseases, too.
Oh, right, because there's no soil for those things to live in.
Exactly. It's like you're creating this controlled environment where everything's, like, in balance.
I love that. Okay, but there's this thing, right? Cycling the water. What is that all about?
Ah, yeah, that's super important, especially when you're first setting things up. Basically, it's all about establishing beneficial bacteria in your system.
Bacteria in my water.
Yeah, but these are good bacteria. They're the ones that break down the fish waste into usable nutrients for the plants.
So without them, the fish waste is just like waste.
It can actually be toxic to the plants if it's not broken down properly. So these bacteria are, like, essential.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this whole balance thing is super important.
It really is.
Yeah.
And cycling the water is, like, the first step in creating that balance.
So how do you actually do it? Like cycle the water? What's involved?
Well, you start by adding a source of ammonia to the water.
Ammonia, like the cleaning product.
Yeah, but in a very controlled way. This basically mimics the waste the fish will produce.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of like jump-starting the process
Exactly. And then you
Mhm.
monitor the water closely with a test kit.
to see what?
You're watching the levels of ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates. Those were
Oh.
all part of the nitrogen cycle.
Right, and that's what the plants need to grow.
Yep. And as the bacteria colonize, they start breaking down the ammonia into nitrites and then into nitrates.
So it's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. And once you see nitrates showing up, that means the cycle is complete and your system is ready for plants.
Wow, it's like a whole science experiment.
It kind of is.
Yeah,
But it's so rewarding to see it all come together.
I bet. Okay, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about fish. We know tilapia are good, but are there other options?
Oh, yeah, for sure. You could use goldfish, koi, even catfish. It really depends on, like, your preference and what's available.
But you always want to make sure they're compatible with the plants, right? Like in terms
Yeah.
of the waste they produce.
Exactly. You don't want to end up with, like, a nutrient imbalance.
Okay, good point. So once we've got our fish, our cycled water, what about the plants? Any specific types of cannabis that do well in aquaponics?
Well, you can grow pretty much any strain, but some are definitely better suited than others.
Like what?
Indicas are usually a good bet, especially for beginners.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
They tend to be more, like, compact and have shorter flowering times, so they're a bit easier to manage in an aquaponics system.
Makes sense. Are there any specific indicas you'd recommend?
Oh, tons. Northern Lights, blueberry, OG Kush. Those are all classics.
I love those. So it's not just about the strain itself, it's about, like, how it grows, right? The root system must be different in water compared to soil.
Totally. In soil, the roots have to, like, search for water and nutrients so they spread out more.
But in aquaponics, it's all right there in the water.
Exactly. So the roots develop differently. They're often called water roots. They're whiter and finer.
Fascinating. It's like they adapt to their environment, like they know they don't have to work as hard to find food and water.
Exactly. And it's amazing how resilient plants are, how they can thrive in all these different
I
conditions.
know. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but I'm sure there are some challenges that come with aquaponic cannabis, right? Like things that people might struggle with, especially if they're new to this.
Oh, yeah, there are definitely some things to watch out for, like maintaining that balance we talked about. That can be tricky.
Right, the balance of nutrients, pH, temperature, all that.
Yeah, it's not just a set it and forget it kind of thing.
So you have to be pretty diligent about testing your water and making adjustments.
Exactly. And you also have to pay attention to your fish.
Oh, right. They're like the canaries in the coal mine, right?
Exactly. If they're not happy, it means something's off with the water quality.
So what are some signs that your fish might be stressed?
If you see them gasping at the surface, swimming erratically, or losing their appetite, those are all red flags.
So keep a close eye on those fishy friends. Okay, so let's say we've tested the water and the pH is off. How do we adjust that?
There are specific pH adjusters you can use, but it's important to make gradual changes.
So no sudden shifts. Got it.
Exactly. You don't want to shock the system.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, one thing I'm personally not too keen on is the idea of dealing with, like, fish poop.
I get it. It's not the most glamorous part of gardening, but honestly, it's not that bad.
Really?
Yeah, the bacteria take care of most of it, so you're not actually handling it directly.
Okay, that makes me feel better. So it's more about, like, regular cleaning and maintenance.
Exactly. Keep the tank clean, remove any debris, and the system will pretty much take care of itself.
I can handle that. Okay, so we've covered the basics of setup, cycling, fish, plants, troubleshooting. I'm feeling pretty confident already.
Awesome. That's the whole point, right? To empower people to try this out.
Absolutely. And I love that there's this whole community out there, like forums and stuff, where people can share tips and advice.
It's a really cool and supportive community. Everyone's learning and experimenting together.
It's like we're all part of this movement towards a more sustainable way of growing, not just cannabis, but all kinds of things.
That's the beauty of it. It's about so much more than just the plants themselves.
I know. Okay, so before we get too carried away, let's bring it back to cannabis. We've talked about the present, but what about the future? What's on the horizon for aquaponic cannabis cultivation?
Ooh, that's a great question. There's so much happening, so many cool innovations. But we'll save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, cliffhanger. I can't wait to hear what's next.
Stay tuned. We'll be diving into some seriously futuristic stuff.
I'm already hooked.
I
Okay,
know.
so for our listeners who are eager to learn more, be sure to join us for part 2, where we'll be exploring the cutting edge of aquaponic cannabis cultivation.
It's going to be awesome.
Until then, happy growing. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So we dove into all the cool sciencey stuff behind aquaponics, but now let's get practical.
Yeah, let's talk about how to actually get started with this whole thing.
Perfect. So where do we even begin? Like, what are the must-have items on our shopping list?
Okay, so first things first, you got to have a fish tank. That's like the heart of the operation.
Okay, makes sense. But how big are we talking? Like, do I need to dedicate an entire room to this thing?
Not necessarily.
Huh.
It really depends on how many plants you're planning to grow.
Oh, okay.
A good rule of thumb is about 1 gallon of water per inch of fish. So the more plants, the more fish, the bigger the tank.
Gotcha. So what kind of fish are we looking at here? We talked about tilapia, but are there other options?
Totally. Tilapia are popular because they're like hardy and their waste is great for cannabis.
Yeah.
But you could also go with goldfish, koi, even catfish.
Cool. So there's some flexibility there. Okay, so it's got the fish tank. What goes above that?
That's where the grow bed comes in. It's basically a platform that sits on top of the tank.
And that's where the plants actually grow, right?
Yep. But instead of soil, you'll use a growing medium, like clay pellets.
No soil at all. Interesting.
Yeah, it helps with drainage and aeration for the roots. Plus, no soil means fewer pests and diseases to worry about.
Oh, right. I see how that works. So we've got the tank, the grow bed. What else?
You'll need a water pump to keep things circulating, moving the water from the tank to the grow bed and back again.
Ah, like the circulatory system of the whole operation.
Exactly. And don't forget an air pump to keep the water oxygenated for the fish. They got to breathe, too.
Of course. Wouldn't want them suffocating in there. And I'm assuming some plumbing is involved to connect everything.
Yeah, you'll need some tubing and fittings to make sure the water flows properly.
Okay, so it's a bit of a DIY project, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, it's totally doable. But remember, once you've got everything set up, you can't just throw in the fish and plants and call it a day.
Right, we talked about cycling the water. Can you walk us through that again, like step by step?
Sure. So the first step is to add a source of ammonia to the water. You can use like pure ammonia from a fish store, just make sure it's the right kind.
Okay, and what does that do?
It basically kickstarts the process of growing beneficial bacteria in the system.
Ah, those little guys that break down the fish waste.
Exactly. And then you got to monitor the water closely using a test kit. You'll be looking at the levels of ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates.
So basically, you're watching to see if the bacteria are doing their job.
Yep. At first, the ammonia levels will be high, but as the bacteria multiply, they'll start converting the ammonia into nitrites.
And then what?
Eventually, the nitrates will be converted into nitrates, which are actually beneficial for the plants.
So it's like this whole transformation process.
Exactly. And
Right.
once you see nitrates showing up in your test results, that means the cycle is complete.
And we're good to go.
Yep, your system is ready for plants. But patience is key here. It can take a few weeks for the cycle to complete.
I'm sensing a theme here. Patience is a virtue in aquaponics.
Definitely. It's all about working with nature, not rushing things.
I like that. Okay, so the water is cycled. We're ready for plants. Any tips on choosing the right cannabis strains for aquaponics?
Well, you want something that's like resilient and can handle the unique conditions of an aquaponic system.
So strong and hardy types.
Exactly. Indicats are often a good choice because they tend to be more compact and have shorter flowering times.
So something like Northern Lights, blueberry, those kinds of strains.
Those are perfect examples. They're classics for a reason.
They're tried and true, but I imagine the root system in aquaponics is quite different from growing in soil, right?
Oh yeah, totally. In soil, the roots have to spread out to search for water and nutrients. But in aquaponics, it's all right there in the water, so the roots don't need to work as hard.
So they develop differently.
They do. They're called water roots, and they're finer and wider than soil roots. They form this dense mat that absorbs nutrients really efficiently.
Wow, it's amazing how plants adapt to their environment.
It really is. And speaking of adaptation, let's talk about some of the challenges you might face when you're growing cannabis aquaponically.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a few hurdles along the way.
One of the biggest ones is maintaining that balance we've been talking about. The balance of nutrients, pH, temperature, all that.
So even though it's a natural system, you still have to like fine tune it.
Exactly. Regular water testing is super important. You need to keep an eye on those ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate levels, as well as pH and temperature.
What are some signs that things might be out of whack? Like, how do you know if you need to make adjustments?
Well, your fish are a good indicator. If you see them gasping at the surface, swimming erratically, or not eating, that's a sign that something's wrong with the water quality.
So keep an eye on those fishy friends.
Yep. And don't just rely on visual cues. Regular water testing will give you a more accurate picture of what's going on.
Okay, good point. So let's say we've tested the water and the pH is off. How do we fix that?
You can use pH adjusters, but the key is to make gradual changes. Sudden shifts in pH can stress out both the fish and the plants.
Slow and steady wins the race. Got it. Now, one thing that I personally find a bit intimidating is dealing with fish waste.
I hear ya, but honestly, it's not as bad as you might think.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bacteria do most of the work breaking down the waste into usable nutrients, so you're not really dealing with it directly.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better.
It's more about regular cleaning and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep the tank clean, remove any debris, and the system will pretty much run itself.
I can handle that. So we've covered the basics of setting up the system, cycling the water, choosing fish and plants, troubleshooting problems.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty good about this.
That's awesome. And remember, there's a ton of information out there if you need help. Online forums, YouTube tutorials, even local aquaponics groups.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a whole community of aquaponics enthusiasts out there, which is really cool.
It's a great resource if you're just starting out. Everyone's super helpful and supportive.
It's like we're all in this together, figuring out how to grow in a more sustainable way.
Exactly. And it's not just about cannabis. Aquaponics can be used to grow all sorts of things. Vegetables, herbs, even flowers.
I love that. It's like a whole new way of thinking about food production and gardening.
Totally. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the future of aquaponic cannabis cultivation.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited to hear about this. What's coming down the pipeline?
Well, get ready for some seriously cool stuff because in the final part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring all sorts of cutting-edge technologies and techniques that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible with aquaponics.
Ooh, I can't wait. This is getting good. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've covered the basics, we've learned about the setup, and now it's time to look ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about the future of aquaponic cannabis. Things are getting really interesting.
I know. Like, what are some of the big trends and innovations that are, like, shaping the future of this whole thing?
Well, one thing that's really taking off is vertical farming. Like, imagine these multi-tiered grow beds stacked on top of each other.
Whoa, so you're, like, maximizing the space growing upwards instead of outwards.
Exactly. And it looks so cool, too, like a futuristic farm.
But how do you make sure each level gets enough light?
That's where LED grow lights come in. You can like customize the lighting for each tier, make sure every plant is getting the perfect spectrum and intensity.
Oh, that's so smart. So it's like each level is its own little microclimate tailored to specific strains.
Exactly. And it's super efficient, too. You're using less energy and getting more yield.
I love it. Okay, and we talked about automation earlier. How is that playing into the future of aquaponics?
Oh, man. Automation is a game changer. Think about it. Sensors that constantly monitor everything, the water temperature, pH, nutrient levels, even the humidity and CO2 in the air.
So it's like the system is constantly checking itself, making sure everything is perfect.
Yep. And all that data gets fed into a control system that can automatically adjust things as needed. Like, if the pH is off, the system can add a pH adjuster,
So it's like the grower has a co-pilot.
pretty much.
Yeah.
But it doesn't replace the grower completely. You still need someone who understands the system, who can make decisions based on the data.
It's like technology is taking over the boring, repetitive tasks, freeing up the grower to focus on the bigger picture.
Exactly. And this kind of automation used to be super expensive, but it's getting more and more affordable.
So it's not just for like big commercial growers anymore.
Nope. Home growers can definitely benefit from this too.
That's great. So beyond vertical farming and automation, what else is shaping the future of aquaponic cannabis?
But one trend that I'm really excited about is data-driven cultivation. Like with all these sensors and monitoring systems, we're collecting tons of data about how plants grow.
It's like big data for cannabis?
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of. And by analyzing all that data, we can like really fine-tune our growing techniques.
So it's like taking the guesswork out of it, making it more scientific.
Exactly. And that means bigger yields, better quality, and less waste.
I love it. It's like we're taking this ancient practice of growing and combining it with cutting-edge technology.
It's a pretty awesome time to be a grower.
Okay, so we've talked about all the cool stuff, but I'm sure there are some challenges too, right? Like, what are some of the hurdles that we need to overcome to make aquaponic cannabis even better?
Well, one of the biggest ones is just awareness. Like, a lot of people still don't know much about aquaponics, or they think it's too complicated or expensive.
So it's about education, getting the word out there.
Definitely. And that's why things like this podcast are so important. We're helping people understand what aquaponics is all about and how they can get involved.
It's about empowering growers, giving them the knowledge and resources they need to be successful.
Exactly. Another challenge is regulation. Like, the laws around cannabis are still evolving. And it can be tricky to navigate, especially when you're doing something new like aquaponics.
So it's about working with lawmakers, advocating for policies that support sustainable growing methods.
Absolutely. And I think we're moving in the right direction. More and more people are recognizing the benefits of aquaponics, both for the environment and the economy.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with those benefits. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling really optimistic about the future of aquaponic cannabis.
Me too. It's an exciting time to be part of this industry.
So what's the one key takeaway you would leave our listeners with today?
If you're at all interested in growing cannabis and you care about sustainability, you got to check out aquaponics. It's a truly rewarding experience.
It's about connecting with nature, embracing innovation, and growing a future where cannabis cultivation is in harmony with the environment.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about creating a better world, one plant at a time.